Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome. And if we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving break. It's always hard to come back the morning after that on Monday, but we're going to get right to it. We're going to start with the approval of minutes from our last meeting. Any questions about them or concerns, or is there a motion to approve?
I just have two comments. On page 2 at the top, the very first sentence, Credit Pathways Program students will be volunteering at BMS to educate students on substance use. Can we change that to substance use prevention? And
Okay.
then on page 3, when it talks about the challenge, I just wanted to make sure Alyssa Coates' name was spelled correctly because it looked a little bit different than I've seen it in the past.
Okay. So can we check that? Everybody in agreement with that? So I can have a motion with changes? That's all you have to do.
I move to approve with those changes.
Okay, great. Can second? Okay, Anita. All in favor? Okay, passes. Thank you. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Let's see. Any adjustments to the agenda? We're all good going forward. This will be the public session if anybody wants to speak regarding what's on the agenda today. I know Brandon wants to, but he's not going to. Okay. He's saving it. All right. Then we're going to move right on to 7.0, the staff report. And I'm going to ask Patrick to introduce our guests.
So in your backup, we gave you just a kind of a reminder, refresher of what the Rev Grant is, so that you wouldn't, when they came in tonight, you'd have that kind of backup, reminder on what it is and what we've done with it. And it's been very instrumental having Micah Depper, who's here tonight. He's been here before to talk about the educational plan, but he's served as an instructional coach, which has made a huge difference at the school, and just a lot of things that they've done. We've talked about the connections classes that is part of the Rev Grant as well. And tonight, part of the funding for the Rev Grant, actually, I guess you could make the argument, the kind of funding that part that's kind of enjoyable, that you're involving students in, staff in. So money has been earmarked, or funds have been earmarked for certain areas. So we have Katie Willis with us here tonight, who is our new gifted and talented teacher. And we have Micah Depper, who is our instructional coach / former science teacher. Will hopefully come back and be a science teacher after this is over, are here tonight. And so is Principal Brandon Ward, just to talk to you about what they're doing, the conversations they've had, and some of the exciting work that they're doing. So come on up. And I think we have some students that'll join us, but it's through a video, correct?
Are we good? Oh, excellent. All right. If Damien can pop that slide up really quick. This is year 2 of the Rev Grant at Bath Middle School. We had an original award of $250,000. We had to take an innovation class from the state to qualify for it. It wasn't, strictly speaking, a competitive grant, but one where we had to prove the quality of our plan in order to be eligible for the funding, and then we got it. Last spring, Brandon and I attended an additional, there we go. That first slide is just a reminder that the anchoring idea behind everything we do in this grant is to create structures and spaces for every member of the BMS community to feel value and connection. So that arose out of this post-pandemic feeling that students were seeing less value in their time at school, feeling disconnected from peers, from teachers. And so all of our innovations are targeted at addressing that issue. So we attended the Sustainability Symposium, which unlocked an additional $100,000, summing us at $350,000 to BMS. Once we were done paying salaries and setting money aside for connections classes and budget for expeditions and things like that, we had an additional $75,000 money available, and we asked ourselves what would be the most innovative thing we could do with this to create value and connection, and we realized that we shouldn't be answering that question alone. So we came up with a process for micro awards where we would basically say to our community of teachers and students, what would you like to do with this money to make BMS a more valuable place where you feel more connected? So we rolled that out in September and October this year, put it to student groups like the one that Katie's going to talk about, as well as our whole staff, and we had a bunch of ideas come out of it. I'm going to just really quickly overview it in about 30 seconds, and then Katie's got a longer presentation that the students made. A lot of ideas coalesced around a few major themes. One was we've put a huge amount of work into theater productions the last 2 years. They were beautiful. They involved each of them between 50 and 60 students, between players, technical, stagecraft people, kids writing the screenplays, directing their peers, and they were very hard to hear. So we are investing in a professional sound system from Stone Mountain Sound, which will take about $18,000 of that. And we're going to have awesome theater productions here after that. There are a number of recess improvements that students wanted, and Katie's going to talk about the process of making that. And then additionally, we realized that the hoop house that we have is way too big to be utilized well by teachers and costs a lot to maintain. And so people came around this idea of replacing it with a smaller, much more permanent greenhouse, investing in indoor gardening supplies that can be used as part of our STEM program, and then liberating some space for an outdoor classroom seating area. So those are a few of the major things that we're funding. And then the rest is going to go towards smaller projects like recording equipment for students to do podcasting as part of their classwork, headphone sets for doing audiovisual work, garden rehabilitation, and so forth. So that's the process, and I'm excited for Katie to show you what the students put together. So thanks for your time.
You're really tall. So my kids really wanted to be here when I actually presented this idea to them that they would be presenting to the school board. They were actually very excited. They weren't nervous or anything. They were like, yeah, when is it? On the date, they're like, oh, it's our first basketball game. So this whole crew of kids are at their first basketball game tonight. So Mr. Depper and I actually did a lot of collaboration at the beginning of this, and he came in as a client to the students, and he was very professional, and he gave them very clear criteria and budget and all of the restrictions and leeways that they can to be able to do this project. And I remember at one point they're like, wait a minute, are you talking about real money? And he's like, yeah, this is real money. I have real money to give you if you can give me a presentation of your, what you think would be doable in the recess area. They shot high at first and had big ideas, big equipment, and big this and big that. And then we had the restraint of it has to be installed and paid for and done by May 1st. And so that kind of reined it back in, and they had to get more practical. What can we do? The ground's going to freeze. What can we get installed? And what do students actually, what would they value for a longer period of time? So this is their presentation that they collaborated and made for Mr. Depper for approval. And they actually, it was approved pretty much by the staff at BMS to move forward with all of their ideas. So it will start with a picture of them and then the video that they would be presenting to you, and then a picture at the end.
Recess area remodeling. The Kennebec GT at BMS saw a need for a change.
This is our playground before. The dumpsters are in the way. There's poor recycled equipment and stuff keeps getting knocked over. So balls go over the guardrail and kids get in trouble trying to get them because that's off-school property, and who wants this eyesore in their recess area? Trash gets everywhere. The basketball hoop is slanted and the net is hanging by a thread, making it very hard to shoot on. Cars and big trucks come to the recess area without knowing that kids are playing because of our dumpsters right there. And the 4 square area is very slippery with dirt.
we had a little idea of putting some tetherball poles down. So here I have a note page about the height, the width, the liability sources, all that and more.
We recently have assembled our Gaga pit and it is set up and running. The kids have been enjoying it and the discipline reports have decreased since the installment of the Gaga pit, keeping the kids busy at recess. And this Gaga pit is very durable and we can take it down for the winter so that way it doesn't get knocked over by the snowplows.
So the basketball hoop should be an easy fix. We can get a new rim and some new nets and just straighten out the pole with a tractor or something, which should be relatively easy.
So to brighten up the space a little bit, we were thinking to do a chalk wall. But we were also thinking against it because of what students might draw on it. That could be inappropriate. We could do a mural for all the kids that love to do some art, just to brighten up all the walls on the side of the school, which would be very inexpensive and quick. And then we have this big, like rusty air vent that we could change into an art piece, or we could just take it down. We also have some seating options. We chose the plastic covered metal. That would be way more durable than the wood. And we could have some shade like trees planted.
With more equipment, the need arises for more storage. So here, pictured, we have an equipment holder for the basketballs. We also have a hoop that we can put above it to encourage the kids to try to shoot the ball into the hoop. Another thought is that there's still footballs and frisbees out there that need to be stored, so we've looked through options for different storage.
So often we have big trucks and cars coming through our recess area, not knowing that kids are outside playing. So we were thinking that we could have signs for the trucks showing that kids are playing, and we could have the recess times listed. Signs or labels on the dumpsters, so that way kids throw their trash into the dumpster and not into the recycling. We could also have signs to encourage students to pick up their trash, so that way there's less trash on the ground.
Here's an aerial view of our recess area and all the different things that we were thinking of putting on it. Here are the signs for the trucks so they don't so they aren't a danger to kids in the playground area. Here could be the wall mural, the Gaga pit, the picnic tables, the air ventilation thing over there that we can fix, the basketball hoops, and the tetherball poles. We all have this measured out so it's everything would be perfectly placed, and we have it all spread out more so there wouldn't be as many conflicts in the area.
So that's the very ambitious Kennebec GT group. They really took ownership of the whole project, and they were very thoughtful of all players at the recess, not just themselves, the active students, but the students who just want to sit and be under shade and read or draw. And so we don't have places to sit right now other than the ground. So they were very thoughtful of all participants of the area, and literally seconds of me screwing in the last bolts of the Gaga pit, there were kids in it playing it. And like they said in the video, I talked to Miss Gallagher, and behavior issues have been almost zero. And she said actually getting students to go outside to play has been a non-issue. Before it was like, go, get outside, go. And now everyone's running to the door. So hopefully we'll have more things installed soon.
Yeah, it sounds like we're awaiting the delivery of the tetherball, and then we have to order the picnic tables and such, but yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions you
Oh,
have
yeah.
about any of the projects that we're doing this year with the Rev Grant?
Any questions? Anybody? Comments? Jamie?
No questions, but I'm so thrilled to see the student engagement, but also the creative ideas, especially around the air vent.
Yeah. that's
Like
great.
you needed a student to come up with that idea. And I loved everything. Well done.
Yeah, they got great energy with just with the whole. What grades were those kids?
That's all 8th
Is
grade.
it all 8th grade?
Yeah.
Okay, it's all 8th. That's fantastic. Fantastic. And tetherball. I'm surprised that they're going to.
Yes.
That's old school. That's good.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's
They
great.
got exposed to it at Shawonky.
Yep.
Is that where it was?
Everybody got
I figured it was that or Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
They don't know it like we know it, but yeah, that's great. That's what a great project. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks for taking the time. All right, that positive note. Let's move to Caroline and Aurora for their student board report.
Hello, everyone. So this week starts the beginning of, or last week started the beginning of most winter sports, but it's kind of in full swing now that Thanksgiving break is over. Aurora is going to talk about how successful Mohiba was, but the Mohiba Ball is happening next weekend, I think on the 9th. And then the last thing for me is that NHS has started to plan out what our project is going to be, and it's going to be mentoring Fisher Mitchell and BMS students. So I don't know how often yet, but it's going to be going down to those schools and spending time with some of the students. So yeah, that's all for me.
And then as Caroline mentioned, we had our 94th annual Mohiba. The theme this year was mystery, and we had over 1,000 audience members come over the 2 nights. And over 117 students participated, either backstage crew, performing, or even ushering. Mohiba is the main fundraiser for the drama department, and so with this money, they'll be working towards the spring musical, which will be Freaky Friday.
That's great. And great job on Mohiba. It was really good. It was really well put together. Everybody did great. Did you have a lot of fun doing it? That's great because it came off great. Any other questions, comments for them? All right, thank you. Let's see. Superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a few items. Dustin Ward, who is our DEI facilitator, so for diversity, equity, inclusion, he's been going around and training all of our staff in the district, and he's still in the process of doing it. And we are going to invite him to a future board meeting so that he can kind of talk to you as well as some reps from the district committee to talk about the work we've been doing last year and this year. Morse football and field hockey were honored with good sportsmanship awards for this fall season, and we're very proud of them for the character and class that they represent us with on the playing fields. And then the last thing I'll just mention is Senator Eloise Patelli's bill made it through the legislative process to help support the emergency provision of Chapter 61, so meaning the emergency funding for potential for Fisher Mitchell. For Dyke Newell. Now the bill will need to go through the whole legislative process, but this is a first step in the right direction. So it'll go to committee referral and then public hearing, work session, and committee report through this springtime. So we'll keep you updated on that as well. And we did just receive, right before break, we received a quote, which I'll share with the board, but a quote from an architectural firm regarding visioning process for Dyke Newell and Fisher Mitchell, as far as ed specs it's called, as well as a site study for the Dyke Newell site. And so I'll get that to you as soon as I can. And that's all I have.
Great. So you said, so say that again with the Dyke Newell, you're starting, what's the timeline?
Yeah,
for that?
we just received a quote, and we probably would start the visioning process in January sometime.
Okay.
And then the
Great.
site study would probably start, my guess would be April because of the weather and everything. But I think both processes would be done by June. And then again, we would have a leg up on the visioning process once we've received funding at some
Right.
point, as well as to make sure
Then
that
we don't
can-
have to take another 6 months.
Exactly. Yep.
We're a step ahead.
Right.
All right. So that sounds good. So that happens early in the year. Okay. Thank you. Deb, financial report.
So tonight we're looking at October, and so far everything is going well. The budget versus actual for salary and benefits last month, I told you we had a little bit of a positive balance, so we pretty much have dedicated it to retirees. So it's good that we did have a positive balance because we have to plan on the longevity payments for those retirees. The staff is asked to notify us by January 15th, so there may be a few more coming. And so far this year, we've spent a little over $12 million, 29.82%. It's a little bit less than last year. On the revenue side, we have 39.89%, which is a little bit more than last year. And on the revenue side, I looked at the tuition numbers for budget versus actual as far as student bodies, and we're up like 21 students. So when those rates come through, I mean, this should be a positive thing for our revenue side, which is good. I think that basically ARP is, we've spent 656,000, so we're looking at 32%. It's a little bit more than last year as far as this time of year, but there's still plenty to finish the projects that we have in place. And that's about it.
Great.
Finance committee next week,
We have the finance committee next week. Yep.
so budget process will start. Any
This is
questions?
budget. It starts. Gosh, it's only December.
I don't know.
Well, it will be next week. Yeah, so what is we start with the finance committee, because what is the agenda for that? That one's, trying to remember.
Well, Hank will be there.
Oh, for the audit,
And
right? It's
we'll
audit.
do a what if as far as an increase, and then we'll go over some of the federal
Okay.
funds
Okay, yeah, because that's the big question with the
schedule.
budget.
for moving forward.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
It begins. I can't believe it's happening already. All right. Any questions for Deb? Thank you. Okay, now we're into 10.0 old business. So we've got a second reading of the board policy JFABD, admission of homeless students. This is an action item. And the second reading of board policy EBCE, school closings and cancellations, also an action item. Are there any questions regarding these policies? No? Yeah. Kurt?
Just wondering if these are adopted or approved, when do they go into effect? Is it immediately or is it the start of next year?
It's a good question.
It's always been immediately after these meetings because we send them out to our staff, and if there's ones that affect, families, we would do the same and update them on our website.
So in reference to the one about bus pickup and drop off, will parents have to be notified of that?
Yeah, that one's first reading tonight, correct?
Yeah,
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 so
that's
that
not
one
what
would
this-
be, so that one would go for a second reading in December, and then we would notify parents, in December for start in January in the new year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that one's the second set of policies. These two right now are just the school closings and cancellations.
Oh,
of the
sorry.
admit-
Yeah.
Yeah, but, okay, any other questions on these policies? Can we take them together and get a motion? Okay.
Second.
All right, any other further discussion? All in favor? Okay. So those are approved. And now moving on to new business, we have a consideration of the waiver request. I think that was in everybody's packet. For when we had to close the 26th and 27th. Do you want to speak to it at all? I think it's pretty
Yeah, I mean,
self-explanatory.
our different regions around the state have spoken about this, and it has to come from, the board of directors in each district to ask or request a waiver for those 2 instructional days for students. And, the request or the letter that's in your backup is a sample letter that we would send up to the commissioner's office requesting, again, a waiver for those 2 days.
All right, so any questions on that? Can I have a motion then?
I approve that waiver.
Okay.
Second.
Second, okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, so that passes. I just need to sign that letter, right? Okay. So I will do that. And now we move on to Katie with the instruction update.
I have two quick updates for you all tonight. The first is from Lou and I, that we've started the later start time or school start time committee again. There have been 2 meetings, and we currently are laying out our communications plan for who are the groups we still need to meet with to collect information about how potentially switching, what we're considering is switching the younger students to earlier, around an 8 o'clock start, and the older students to an 8:40-ish start. There are a couple different options within that range, so that's not exact, but the idea being that all the research that we read prior to the pandemic when this started, and there's even more of it now, basically states that the mental health, I mean, there's substance use. It's pretty astounding, actually, how positively more sleep impacts students this age. So without getting into all the research, we have a group that is pretty excited about moving it forward this year. It would require all of you to vote on it. We would need to we're planning on having some community meetings. I've created a slideshow with a lot of the research that we'll be able to send out and post. And then we're also I have to create a 1-page sort of brochure that's the quick sort of reasons for this to potentially happen. In terms of the context, California has already made this a state mandate, and Florida, that high schools can't start earlier than 8:30. And Maine is actually considering it, although they're really in the process right now of having a subcommittee, which Brandon Ward is actually on, think about school start times and a bunch of other issues, and they're due to present back to the legislature, some group within the legislature. I think it's the Educational Affairs Committee. I'm not sure of the exact wording of that group, around February 1st. So ideally, our committee would love if the state made this a mandate, because it would make everything a lot easier. But everyone, when we discussed this, still felt strongly that we should move forward with our research and our discussions to see where we got as a district. So the upcoming meetings will include members of our SEA union, again, checking in with the athletic director on how this will impact sports, childcare facilities, Bath Tech's advisory board with all the superintendents from ascending schools, because it would obviously impact them. I showed them the options prior to the pandemic when this started, but that entire group of administrators are all now new people. So we're going to do it again. They were in support of it then. So I feel like, and Lou and I have sort of clarified this, that I am the purveyor of the information and getting everyone to discuss. And then I just want to bring it to your attention that you will either vote on it this year, or it could be the year after, depending on how it's received, how people in the community feel about it moving forward or not, and the timeline. So the other piece of information, we had the pre-K to 8 principals and myself had a great meeting with Michelle Small from Bath PD about how we could better educate our students and work with them, and also the Saginaw Sheriff's department on substance use prevention education. I think many of us probably, when we were in school, remember the DARE program, That's no longer being used. What is being used is, it's called LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs and Violence. And they have developed a curriculum that's being used in 44 states right now. It's K to 12. And you can kind of decide where your touch points are in terms of what grades. And the principals and Michelle and Chuck and I sort of talked about that we'd like to get this education started earlier, because 6th and 7th grade is now starting to be the time when some experimenting takes place. And so our plan is to pilot this with our 6th graders this spring at both Woolwich and BMS, and then next year to have officers lined up to teach all of our 2nd graders and 4th graders, and then the next class of 6th graders. So we're hoping that it can be a 2nd grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade program, and it would take place during guidance classes. It's 10 weeks of about a half an hour-ish per week. So questions about either of those two things? And it's free.
Nice. Any questions? Yeah.
What do you teach the 2nd graders?
It's a great question. I haven't seen all the details of the program, but when she spoke about it, it's a lot around how to make healthy choices for your body. What the role of law enforcement and other adults who are in charge is. How different things like you eat or ingest could potentially impact what your body does. Very age appropriate, which is why it's being adopted in so many different states. So a 2nd grade curriculum is very different, she said, than what the 6th graders would get. It's much more around building sort of social emotional ideas and advocacy around student choice. And then in the upper grades, it's much more about more of the nitty gritty of substance use and its impacts and violence and its impacts.
Great. Any other? Go ahead.
I noticed Midcoast Pediatrics has a TV in their waiting room, and it shows like gummies and says if it looks like candy, so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it's different things like that
Yeah.
are age appropriate.
Mhm.
Will there be a parent component?
There is. There actually is. I have my notes here. There is a parent component that can go on and that can go home, and it is also for every grade. So it won't just be the 6th grade parents who would get it, and that helps you understand as a parent what it was that was spoken about, what language was used, especially at each developmental level, and how you can follow up with your students.
Go ahead, Aurora.
Just one more thing. I had a research project last year, kind of research project that was focused on substance abuse, and a lot of the reading I did supported all of that. Yeah, just the younger age group, making sure they're educated as well, and not just focusing at it during teenage years, and parental involvement being very important about it. So I think it's great.
Thank you.
That's great. Any other questions? Sounds like a great program.
Great.
I was just going to ask,
Oh, yeah.
Caroline or Aurora, do you have any just initial thoughts on what Ms. Joseph talked about with starting later? I know it won't affect you, Caroline, but I mean, any thoughts you guys have or your reaction to that?
Yeah, I was kind of going to ask, I figured this was something that would be talked about. I was really going to how are after school, not even just sports, but pretty much everything. Is the day going to be shortened, or is it going to be 8:40? That was my question. I mean, I think it's great, but
That's where a lot of the controversy comes in for folks who are so used to it's more a logistics issue. Yeah, Rory, what about you?
Yeah, I was also thinking about winter and how if once it's 3 o'clock you get out of school and then it's just dark, right? So that would be my only other concern with it, is just to get out of school and be like, oh well, time to go to sleep.
Yeah, that's true.
You get plenty of sleep.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. And the younger kids would start earlier?
Mhm.
And is that presumably because parents make the kids go to bed, whereas high schoolers usually can't?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. And they actually, and I have the link to the studies they've done to make sure that switching younger kids a little earlier doesn't then negatively impact them. And so, yeah, I think the main scientific reason that we read about for the change is that, and I actually didn't know this, around 9th and 10th grade, the circadian rhythm of a human body changes where you don't, they talk about how the melatonin that's released to make all of us feel tired isn't actually physically released in teenagers around that age until it's like, I would say between, they actually mentioned 11, so like 10 and 11. Accurate? When do you get tired? Yeah. So because of that, if you add on the 8 to 10 hours of sleep someone that age is supposed to get, that's why, and knowing that sometimes it's not even at that time that someone falls asleep, that's where they came up across the country with the 8:30.
And you said California's already doing this
And Florida.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And actually there's 2 districts in Maine that when Nate Priest, our old athletic director, was here, he did a huge amount of research on those that had switched, and what happened with their after school activities, the pros, the cons. And he shared with us that he was convinced he could make it all work.
And middle school would be wrapped up with high school time?
Middle school BMS would be high school time, which, because it's the kindergartners, would be the younger time. Yeah. And the crux of the science or the research is all around, like, high school is the most important. Obviously, 7th and 8th grade would be great too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know anything about how the students have taken it in Florida and California?
I mean, a lot. It's a great question. And actually, I should have mentioned our plan is also to include students and student surveys and parent surveys in our work this year. There's a national group called the School Start Time. I can't remember the exact name, but they are the ones sort of leading the charge behind this research. And they have a ton of student quotes from places who've done this that are all sort of saying similar things to what both of you said, which is that it makes sense for their normal schedules, that as long as the after school activities and their job schedules can work out, that they would prefer it. But I couldn't speak for all students.
Just one other thing to consider. My freshman year, I would get home before my sister, and then I would like babysit her. So just for her to get home earlier might be a bit of an issue for childcare, which I think you mentioned.
Yeah, that's actually an issue that's come up a bunch of times, which is why we're going to have parents sort of weigh in on surveys around that, and then also talk to the Y, Head Start, and other daycares in the area. So, yeah.
Because now you have a lot of parents dropping them off early for before school care. Maybe it's more of just an brief after school care before some other sibling, gets out or something. I mean, I'm sure there's ways to work around it. We're just so used to the schedule that it's a real life change, even though all the science, that's what we were amazed. We first did this before the pandemic, looking at everything, we expected to see the pros and the cons. There were no cons. I mean, there's no report, no science, no scientific report as to why you shouldn't do this. Yeah, it's logistics, right? Those are the. It is.
On that group's website, I mentioned all of the states that are considering statewide bills. I want to say it was upper.
And do we know how long California and Florida have been doing it?
I want to say California maybe is in year 2. I think Florida just started. But again, I don't have to say anything
Yeah, there's probably some good research. I know that the Seattle School District was one of the first to start it, so there are big cities here and there, but not really.
Can I just mention too that there's a lot of local pediatricians who fully support this
Yeah, so
and
we
advocate.
actually had two.
Great. Any other? Yeah, Aurora, go.
Just as one final testament to kind of its importance, especially among high school students, is I have epilepsy, and so if I don't get enough sleep, it's a mess. And so waking up later would be a great help just to students who might suffer from that.
Good point. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? All right. Well, good discussions. It gets people going. We'll keep talking about it and keep working on it. And like Katie said, we're going to involve students and parents, with the whole community. We're not just, this is not a decision to be made lightly, whatever we decide to do. Okay, we're going to move. Is that you all set, Katie? Or is there anything else? Okay. Thank you very much for all the updates. Now we have first reading of board policies that are EE, Transportation and Services Management, EEAA, Student Transportation Policy, IKF, Graduation Requirements. And you all got this in your packet, saw the updates. Any concerns, questions with the language? Any other use that should be prevented or that was a good catch. Or anything else that we need to do before we move it to the next. And I assume, Kurt, you were talking about with the student transportation policy because that changes things to what you have to, is it K to 2?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change here is the EEAA, where it was just kindergarten, where we would not let them off unless there was a parent or an adult present. Now we're looking to shift that to K to 2. And again, that would start in January, would be the timeline for that.
Yeah, just thinking about the logistics, I don't know what impact that would have on pathway.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I've talked about it with the bus service a little bit, with our principals a little bit. I don't think they were feeling like, I think they felt like the majority of their stops, there is an adult present. But I can follow back up with the principals and see if, whether there's a survey or whether there's just, more communication we can put out about it. So in case there is a concern, we do this now with K, as if there's a extenuating circumstance where there's something going on. I can't think of an example right now, but we have accepted an email or a letter from a parent or guardian if we need to make an exception that's legitimate.
Right, and this change may not affect. You don't know how many people.
No.
Right. That's why we'll communicate it when.
Yeah.
Why are we what was there some research there, or was there an incident?
Yeah, we had some confusion this fall with one in particular, and then where I think there was a place where we dropped off a young student, and I think maybe there was an assumption made that there was a parent present, but there wasn't at one incident. And it made us just revisit the policy and look at it, calling some other districts, and just revisiting is kindergarten, should we be moving that standard up some as far as having an adult present when you drop them off in the afternoon? So that's kind of what prompted this, and it was a good discussion to have at the policy level and with the principals as well.
Could I just ask, says unless a parent or designee is present, how does a bus driver determine that in that few seconds when they're letting kids off and there's 5 different kids?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm referring to, and that happened, early this year. So I do think, there's a little bit of judgment there, especially if you're dropping them off at a site where there's 3 or 4 different people. But, again, Yeah, I'm not sure I can give you a better answer than that. I think they do their best to get to know people, but especially when you're talking about, your the kindergarten students. And once you're through that, it gets pretty easy, but I mean, just communication, I guess, in the mornings, having conversations and then asking the question, but again, they can always bring them back to the school. If there's any doubt at all, students, bring them back to the school and we can help with that situation.
Okay, any other questions on these policies? And again, if you think of something later, we're not voting on this till next month, so you've got time if you read through it some more and decide, something's not clear or you have an issue with any part of the policy, okay? All right, let's move on to 11.4. This is some first drafts of some new positions, correct?
Yeah, job descriptions,
Or job
really.
description, okay.
One is like custodial supervisor is fairly new to us. And again, because we took over custodial from a private company, that Dennis has put a lot of time and effort into drafting or revising these job descriptions for these positions. So there's a lot there, but if you have questions, this is just a kind of a first reading. It follows what we do with policies. So we'd ask you to vote on it next month.
So we would vote on these
Yes.
positions because we didn't have them, and people have been doing the jobs. We
Yes.
just now that they're within the district, okay. So we do vote on that. All right. Any questions on those positions? No?
My only question,
Yeah.
sorry, I have to comment on everything tonight, is for very entry level, like custodian, high school diploma or equivalent, could I advocate for young adults who maybe are working toward their high set or GED? Anyway, just something to
Okay.
think about.
All right. Anything else? Good comment. All right. Moving on, 12.0 personnel items.
Yeah, just one resignation. All of you know this already, but just Julie Kenny is resigning, and I'd like to thank her for 7 years of service as the Bath Tech Director. She had a lot to do with designing this facility with us through this process, seeing our enrollment increase over the last handful of years, and also just we've expanded our programming, which also goes with the enrollment increase. So I'd like to thank her. I hope by maybe as early as tomorrow, but definitely this week, we'll be able to give you information on an interim director and then when that person will start so that Julie will transfer over to a different school district. And then our plan is in March is when we would open it up for a full-time director, and we would have staff, we would have one of you, we'd have maybe a student and other people on that full committee where we would find a full-time replacement. Hopefully we'd bring that to you for your approval in April or May at the latest. So.
Great, thank you. Right here I have 13.0 board goals. That's usually something Jennifer does. I don't know if it's anything you
I would just
want to refer to.
Yeah, I guess I can play Jennifer tonight as number 2, safe and supportive schools. I would just say the DEI presentation that we'll have coming up soon. We'll touch on that. Pre-K to 5 programming. Katie and I have been working on that behind the scenes to develop a schedule so that we can have staff come in and talk to you about the different things that we're doing and our data. And then facilities, I kind of provided you with an update, but I'll send you more in-depth information about those 2 studies that we're going to do.
Great. Next meeting date is going to be December 18th, 1 week before Christmas. Hard to believe. And so it's a little earlier. And unless there's anything else, I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. See, you're all on top of that. All right. Any any discussion? No? All in favor? All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening.